Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Biotech expansion Mammalia. For starters, you'll need to own the Biotech DLC as well as the additional workshop content Biotech expansion Core. Whilst not required, this mod also has integrations with alpha genes. A fantastic little mod which adds a great deal of new xenotypes to your game, all with an art style and design philosophy that stays faithful to vanilla, meaning those of you that are like me and can't stand mods that don't quite look right won't be driven mad by using this. So what does Mammalia add? 2 optional factions, 9 new xenotypes and more genes than you can shake a furry tail at. It goes a long way in adding both functional and cosmetic genes, including a few that aren't applied to any of the added xenotypes, meaning they exist purely to appear either as a gene pack, giving you some new toys to play with, or they're there to be used when creating a custom xenotype of your own. So 2 optional factions. What have we got? Mammalia by default doesn't weave any of its xenotypes into existing factions, meaning if you want to see these regularly appearing in your game, you need to make sure that the factions are included during world generation. You have the Skulking Mammalkin tribe, which includes 5 of the new xenotypes: Barkkin, Bone Crown, Wiretail, Hidewing, and Seartusk. These are typically more aggressive xenotypes, with better combat capabilities. Then you've got the Gentle Mammalkin tribe, which features the Hindhopper, Hay Tankard, Cloudpuff, and Blastheart. If you're using alpha genes, this faction also includes the Devilpuff, making the total xenotypes added up to 10. As you might have guessed by the name of these xenotypes, and the dead obvious giveaway with the naming of the mod, all of these xenotypes are based on Terran mammals. There is also a quick addition to mention in the gene pool before we break down any of these xenotypes and genes added with Mammalia, and that is the 3 genes of Feral Might, Carnivorous, and Herbivorous, which come from Biotech expansion Core. As you'll need the Core mod to even run Mammalia, you're always going to have these genes. Feral Might makes unarmed combat more viable, increasing damage by 125% when the pawn is using their claws, teeth, hooves, horns, or rather deviously, any hidden weaponry that you've equipped them with like knee spikes or venom talons. This gene has the potential to make fearsome races that do end game amounts of damage right from the start. Well worth messing around with. Then you've got Carnivorous and Herbivorous, which restrict the pawn to either a purely meat or a purely veggie diet. Carnivorous also removes the debuff for eating corpses, allowing your pack to feast on fresh kills whilst hunting. Very thematic, really nice touch. So, starting with the Barkkin, somewhat a mix of wolf and fox, hence the mixture of vulpine and lupine features. Going forward, I'll only be mentioning cosmetic genes if they impart some kind of stat change. Otherwise, you're safe to assume it's purely for aesthetic, with the caveat being, most mammalian nose features reduce the romance chance to 20% if their partner doesn't share the same one. This is Rimworld after all, not impossible creatures. So you've got Sharp Claws, which change bruise damage of fists into rapid, sharp chip damage. They're especially ruthless against unarmoured targets but typically fall off if enemies start wearing anything more than clothing. The biggest danger is the ferocity of the bleeds that such small, quick cuts can achieve, meaning that the potential prisoners will be on their last breath by the time you get them back to a bed. They also have Feral Might, which increases their claws damage, practically negating the damage debuff from taking sharp claws, which usually results in enemies losing a limb or 2 in combat. Barkkin are carnivorous, meaning you'll always need to be hunting, and they'll also be unable to eat any meals made with meat and veggies without getting food poisoning. It's well worth giving them a food restriction based around this. Despite the combo of strong stomach and robust digestion, the food poisoning from carnivorous still takes effect. What this allows you to do instead is to eat raw meat or corpses for a massive nutrition bonus, without any fear of a mood debuff or poisoning chance, so ideally you don't want Barkkin consuming meals at all. Barkkin are also quite savage in their nature, with the combination of aggressive and kill thirst, making them prone to aggressive mental breaks and giving them a need to kill targets in melee combat. If they go too long without bloodshed, they gain a mood debuff, likely pushing them into a more dangerous mental break. They have dark vision as standard, removing penalties from working or fighting at night, although they're not naturally gifted workers. Being poor with animals and awful at art, they also struggle to use ranged weapons. On the plus side, they're always savage in melee. Thanks to their tail and fur skin combo, they get an additional 20 degrees of minimum comfortable temperature to play with, and they aren't bothered by nudity. All in all, they're a solid brawler with a lovely low hunger rate and a very easy feeding option to boot. These guys are simple enough to keep around the base and just be thrown on the front lines as and when they're needed. Next, you've got the Bone Crown, a bit of an elk and deer mashup. Where the Barkkin was about cutting, the Bone Crown is about bruising. Their heavy hooves are like war hammers, dealing massive blunt damage and working well against armour. Much slower than standard fists, but far less likely to bounce off plate, or even spacer armour. And when hooves won't do it, you can always just headbutt them instead.
Chop chop.
Antlers give all Bone Crowns access to a melee stun attack, fantastic to lock dangerous targets down, stop enemies repositioning, or simply give yourself a second or two to break away from combat and get some distance yourself, which might be tricky as they're hampered with the negative of being a slow runner. Bone Crowns are unfortunately a little bit fragile about temperature. Whilst fur skin does negate some of their cold weakness, they really don't do well in warmer climates. To make up for their temperature sensitivity, they do have the awesome trait of Robust, lowering incoming damage to 75%. And finally, for skills, Bone Crowns are naturally good with plants and socialization, a solid combo. This does make them a little hungrier than normal though, so you need to put that plant skill to use and increase the size of your farms to keep these guys fed. Now comes the Wiretail, rat mice or mice rats, which sit in a bit of a weird place. Wiretails are extremely vulnerable in combat if you can hit them. Their sensitive whiskers provide the same dodge boost as the Nimble trait, whilst increasing their pain sensitivity. They also have extra pain, which forces the Wimp trait, lowering their pain shock threshold by 50%. Normally, what this results in is Wiretails going down in a single blow, with them being especially vulnerable to firing lines thanks to charging ahead with Fast Runner. However, if these do get you in melee combat, it becomes an absolute nightmare. Their tail increases manipulation, the claws increase attack speed and make their attacks cut. Not only that, they have reduced melee damage, meaning most of the time they're barely dealing more than 5 damage a hit, but they're hitting you like a melee minigun, ripping your colonists to shreds, causing ridiculous bleed percentages, and likely giving multiple infections if they aren't quickly tended. They're the pawn-sized equivalent of a guinea pig raid. The damage itself won't kill you, but the amount of time it takes to stop the bleeding will.
We stop the bleeding! We stop the bleeding!
Wiretails also have fur skin, helping with the cold temperature range, and they do well at working with mining and crafting, creating tunnels underneath cities to find more warpstone. Yes, yes. The Hidewing is another fragile race, based on a bat. Whereas the other races fight with claws or hooves, Hidewings enjoy biting, striking quickly, if somewhat weakly, with their jaws. To aid them getting in or out of combat, their wings allow them to make short jumps, additionally granting them better protection from the elements, along with their fur skin, all at the cost of a small manipulation penalty, due to their arms being constrained to the connected wing. Hidewings are even more fragile than Wiretails, with not just extra pain, but delicate too, making them take 115% damage from attacks and falling into pain shock almost instantly. As such, their combo of Fast Runner, the Wings, and Farsighted should tell you what you need to know. These bats are far better suited to standing back and helping at range.
Okay, so now the bat has a gun and the knives I gave him.
Especially during night raids, as they have the innate dark vision to remove any accuracy penalties. Finally, they're gifted with strong cooking and animal skills, at the cost of being awful doctors and researchers. It must be difficult to read notes when hanging upside down on the ceiling, I guess. And finally, for the Skulking tribe, you have the Sear Tusk, your very own elephant.
He likes peanuts.
Sear Tusks come with an innate size sensitivity and an ability, Psychic Fury Needle. Operating like a ghetto psychic lance, this ability has a far greater chance of causing brain damage, which makes the Seertusk Raiders exceedingly dangerous to your colonists, as you not only risk your own defenders turning against you, but if it goes wrong, they'll likely be turned into a cabbage. Whilst they're slow moving, they make for a great front line when charging into enemies. They're immune to stagger damage thanks to Unstoppable, and have reduced pain, meaning they're more likely to make it into melee and have shrugged off any distractions caused by the projectiles that did land on them. However, Seertusk come with a suite of weaknesses to make up for these strengths. They're naturally unhappy, likely caused by them having their elephant memory, which forces the Great Memory trait, so they remember every single rejection, slight, or outright insult thrown their way. They're naturally slow healers, so whilst they can shrug off injuries and keep fighting, they will be out of action much longer afterwards. They are also extremely vulnerable to any form of toxic damage, gas, fallout, pollution, whatever it may be, with a 200% reduction to their resistance, meaning that travelling through polluted environments is a massive no-go for them. And to top it all off, they're sleepy too, requiring either an afternoon nap or some chems to keep them going through a full day. On the upside of all this, their trunk gives them a huge boost of 10% to manipulation. They have dead calm, so they'll never use their physical prowess against a fellow colonist if they break down, and they have strong medical, social, and intellectual skills, the golden trifecta of things that are always useful to have. This makes raids from the Skulking tribe an interesting proposition. Because of the speed differences, they normally end up splitting themselves if they have to travel across a great distance, with the fragile Wiretails and Hidewing leading the charge, then a group of Barkkin, and finally the Bonecrowns and Seertusks bringing up the rear. If they do attack in large numbers, you'll want to get those initial Wiretails and Hidewings down ASAP. If they tie you up in melee, giving the Seertusks a chance to get close enough to throw abilities, it gets very dangerous. If there aren't a great deal of Wiretails or Hidewing, meaning you can't make the enemy flee by picking off the weaker members, it can quickly become a massacre. With such high damage potential from all of the other races in melee, and often overwhelming odds as they are only a tribal faction, you don't want to underestimate enemies that all come in unarmed. Onto the Gentle tribe then. These races are typically much more associated with livestock or farm animals, giving bonuses towards a happy colony rather than boasting high combat capabilities. The Hindhopper is up first, a bunny rabbit with all of the combat weaknesses. Sensitive whiskers like a wiretail, increasing dodge chance but also pain felt. They then have extra pain, so 50% less shock threshold, and they're delicate, so that's 115% damage taken. It's best to think of them like a football player, so if someone sneezes in the same postcode, they'll fall to the floor and scream for help. You wouldn't want these guys anywhere near combat anyway, as they also have weak melee damage and pyrophobia, on top of awful shooting and melee skills. So they can't fight, can't shoot, can't burn things. What exactly are we using them for? Forager's intuition is a massive buff to plant harvest yield, plant work speed, and pruning speed if you're using the trees from Ideology. As mentioned in the tooltip for this gene, you'll need another mod to make this work as intended. Unlimited has you covered for this, removing caps on percentage bonuses. If you're playing with a lot of vanilla expanded mods and not using Unlimited, you're missing out. A lot of modded content is designed to go above and beyond base game limits. Anyway, you'll want that additional yield as hindhoppers are also herbivorous, so they can only eat veggies. Make sure that they're not set to consume meals that use meat as an ingredient, as they'll spend the next 48 hours filling your base with barf. They make for great planters and miners, with skill buffs as standard, and the very fast runner trait, allowing them to get to work that much faster every morning. Even better is kind instinct, so hindhoppers are unlikely to ever be involved in a social fight, just as well because they'd likely die in a single punch. As with most of the mammal races, they benefit from fur skin too. Next up, you've got the hay tankard. If you've ever wanted to milk your colonists but can't really stomach installing the Forbidden mod, now there's a way that you can.
I have nipples, Greg.
Could you milk me?
Based on a cow, but looking genetically like a little bit of a mix between a seer tusk and a bone crown, the hay tankard is the most robust of the gentle tribe races. Boasting heavy hooves and strong melee damage as a combo, meaning that in a fight some limbs can be utterly destroyed in one good hit from them, they also shrug off damage with robust and reduced pain, making for a savage melee combatant that's dangerous to even armoured opponents that out-tech them. Whilst hay tankards aren't fussy about what they eat, the strong and robust stomach sees them most benefiting from raw food, similar to a barkkin. Unlike a barkkin, you definitely don't want hay tankards eating corpses, as they still have a sizable mood penalty for that. And of course, there's the previously mentioned excess milk production. It's a pretty big bonus for having them around the base. If you can manage their diet carefully, giving them raw veggies, they can practically balance out their food consumption via the nutrition of the milk that they produce. Hopefully none of your colonists are going to have any issues sitting around a dinner table eating rice pudding made from their milk. As you'd expect, they're great with plants. So how is all of this balanced out? Well, they're slow and aggressive, which makes sense given their melee setup. They also struggle to cook and, like a seer tusk, need more sleep, and have the fatal weakness to any toxins, so you'll want lovely green pastures to keep them happy and healthy. As with almost all of these races, they've got fur skin to keep them nice and warm. Now we've got the cloud puff, which feels like if said out of or in the wrong context is something that would get me demonetised. They're a race of sheep, and as such they produce wool for the colony every so often. Their rapid coat growth also further protects them from the elements, as well as the fur skin gene. This plays into the naked speed gene, which sees a cloud puff moving slower when wearing clothes, or faster if they're stark bollock naked. Whilst normally this is something beyond consideration due to the lack of armour, they aren't really a race that I'd be eager to throw into combat anyway. Whilst they may have robust, they're also hit with slow wound healing, weak melee damage, extra pain, and the horrifying combo of tinder skin and pyrophobia. So if any enemies start to use fire against a cloud puff, not only will they run around uncontrollably, they'll take 400% damage whilst doing so. Big oof. The weak melee damage also greatly hampers their heavy hooves, as the slow, reliable blunt damage now becomes slow, middling bruises that don't do enough damage to down an enemy from pain, nor break limbs to cripple them. So we know that we want them far away from combat. Thankfully, they have kind, a strong social skill, and strong crafting, so they're ideal wardens and tinkerers, just maybe don't have them making anything with chem fuel. Like a few of the other mammals, they have a strong and robust stomach too, making it easy for them to keep fed with raw foodstuffs, on top of an already easy metabolic rate. If you're using alpha genes, you'll also have devil puffs, which isn't a slur for Raphael in Baldur's Gate 3.
I will not abide it.
Whereas cloud puffs grow wool, devil puffs grow devil strand at a slow rate. Whilst there are some commonalities between these races, other aspects are total opposites. Both have hooves, strong stomachs, slow wound healing, naked speed, weak melee damage, robust, extra pain, fur skin, strong crafting, and social. However, the devil puff swaps out tinder skin, pyrophobia, and kind for unhappy and aggressive. They're miserable and eager to take it out on somebody else. Fortunately, because of their genetic makeup, when they do start a social fight, they regularly do next to no damage and go down in a single punch. They also consume more food than cloud puffs to make up for the better quality material that they passively produce, and whilst 30 devil strand every 30 days isn't exactly something to write home about, if you're keeping blood bags around for any sanguiphages, you might as well get something extra from time to time. Out of all the production xenotypes featured with this mod, devil puffs may be one of the best. And finally you have something very Rimworld, blast hearts. Walking, talking boomalopes that come with all of the downsides you'd expect. Let's cover some of the bits that we know first. Heavy hooves, strong and robust digestion, slow wound healing, tinder skin and pyrophobia combo, delicate but with reduced pain, and the usual fur skin. So an odd mix for combat. They take additional damage and heal slowly, but they don't care about how badly they're hurt. It's almost like they're designed to stay in combat until they die or something. So let's mention the obvious bits. Chem fuel generation, just like a boomalope. They have painful pustules that make the blast hearts ugly to look at, a very handy smoke exhaust which reduces enemy accuracy in combat, and a wonderful new addition, Death Blast. Unlikely to be something you're eager to use on your own pawns, but highly effective as a target when an enemy raid contains a few blast hearts. As a few of the gentler tribe xenotypes already have pyrophobia and tinder skin, killing just one blast heart in the middle of their pack can cause a chain reaction and bring everything tumbling down in a matter of seconds. It can also go the other way, as not bringing down a blast heart until they're right on top of you can break your melee line when they run around screaming, covered in napalm. Blast hearts also have a mild cell instability, so expect them to struggle with illnesses and suffer from health related issues more frequently. Just any excuse for them to die, I guess. Not at all surprisingly, they are bad in social situations, thanks to their whole unsightly appearance, but they do well as doctors. I guess given how much time they spend in hospital getting better, they've just picked it up. There are 2 final genes included in the mod which require Archite capsules to use. Antimatter Death Blast, which is exactly what it sounds like, and Antimatter Harvest Cell, which requires the Death Blast but allows you to very occasionally harvest an Antimatter Shell from the pawn with the gene combo. Probably better not to think about where exactly you're extracting the shell from. If you're eager to do something really dumb with these genes, you have a few options. Making people invisible and running right into the middle of an enemy raid, or launching them via a transport pod into the centre instead. Maybe you're just treating your colony as a if one dies we all die kind of vibe. They would absolutely have a fantastic metabolic efficiency if you were using this gene, so you could honestly try and make it work if you were feeling brave, or incredibly stupid. And then at some point you'd have a bunch of anti-grain shells lying around, making IEDs or mortars absolutely catastrophic for enemy raids. All you need is one bad twist of fate though, and your whole base would be gone in an instant. I think that about covers it. I'll be going over the other Biotech expanded release shortly, Mythic, which is easier to cover in terms of content but more complicated mechanically, so keep an eye out for that one. Thanks for watching folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.